Today I'm going to talk about how to analyze media. And again, I'm concentrating on science fiction short narratives. But in my experience, this method can work on any media, music, art, whatever you pick. So feel free to try it out. Let me know. The basic tenet is really simple. What attracts your attention? What interests you? What catches your eye? Take note of that because we each have our own backgrounds and contexts. That is going to be different for every person. So every person's paper and outlook is going to automatically be different because you're coming from a different point of view. So even if you and your buddy are analyzing the same piece, your paper should be different. You might keep that in mind. But it should be easy because you're going to be attracted by different things. So I have chosen to look at Harlan Ellison's short story, Repent, Harlequin, said the TikTok man. And let me bring it up on this computer. So first I read the story to enjoy it. And then because I wanted to look for characteristics of chaos, I actually write down my list again. Some of you guys will have much better memories. So our list of chaotic characteristics were that the systems are complex, sensitive to initial conditions, deterministic, dynamical, yes, I'm cheating, nonlinear, self-similar at different scales, and produced by iteration. And that's why I write them down. Can't remember them. So I'm going to keep those in my mind as I go through the story. I'm also going to keep in mind Ellison's context, because just as each of us has our own context to approach the story, he wrote it from his own context. And he wrote Repent, Harlequin in 1965. So there had been 2 world wars. We thought we had had wars to end all wars, but we found ourselves in a Cold War. We were in the midst of a scientific revolution. We thought that gathering data, using the scientific method and rationality could solve all of our problems, cure all of our ills, feed the hungry, everything. We had also found that we could, in an industrial world, reliably create, mass-produce products and deliver them to people. We thought we had it made. So there was a large group of society that had found the answers they were looking for. But in contrast to the status quo, there was a counterculture who sort of rebelled against the conservatism, the status quo, and they emphasized individualism and that not every question has an answer. And look, we're still at war. So about this time several years earlier, 1961, chaos theory began to gain notoriety. So all of this was happening for Ellison, and he wrote this story. All right. So, and yes, I still have a cheat sheet just to make sure that I don't leave anything out that I wanted to circle. So I just go through and circle what interests me. And oops, let me try that again. All right, here we go. All right, that's a huge circle, but I wanted to circle the fact that men are using their bodies as machines. And a little bit farther down here, we find that when they use their brains, they're not making moral distinctions. So they're not individuals. They're not thinking for themselves. They're part of the industrial technology here. But the very next paragraph is this one, where we find that the story is nonlinear. It starts at the heart, then it begins in the middle, then gets to the beginning. So here's an important distinction between the structure of the story being nonlinear and the content of the story he's telling being chaotic. So if you were going to use these initial feelings about what interests you to write your papers, then you probably would want to make that distinction for me. But you can use both, and I certainly would if I was writing my paper on this story. All right, so then we have a little bit of chaos introduced with the nonlinearity. Then in the next paragraph, we go right back to the machine functioning smoothly. So we get to the top of the next page, and we find that they had no way to predict he would happen. He is the Harlequin. So here we have the complexity of society, the complexity of the situation that they thought they had under control because the machine was running smoothly with all that smooth, the best butter. But unpredictability is part of chaos. Just like we can't predict the weather, they couldn't predict that the Harlequin would happen. And a little bit farther down, we find that the TikTok man, no one calls him that, to his mask. So he's a faceless bureaucrat. He doesn't have an individual identity. He's part of the system. All right, let's change pages. Get rid of the ink. Oops. Next page, we really get into it. This is one of my favorite pages, as a matter of fact. All right. The Mondrian arrangement of buildings. The metronomic left, right, left. We have the shift. They're not individuals. It's all one shift. A minute later, precisely, here's another right, left, right of the formation going home. Here's all of your industrialization, machination, precision. Contrast it immediately with the Harlequin's elfish grin. Perhaps not even human, perhaps magical, definitely not part of rational thought. And the Harlequin is introduced as a character and individual immediately. He has tanned features, dimples. Oops, I'm not very good at this. He has auburn hair, and he's shrugged into his motley, which is the jester's multicolored clothing. So, Jester in past times could criticize society without getting punished because he was doing it as a joke. He was the court fool. This doesn't work so well for the Harlequin. I don't know whether I would explore that in a paper about chaos. That would be up to you whether it fit in for you or not. Let me move on. In the next paragraph, he swirls away on a vagrant breeze, so a wandering breeze, a whim of a breeze. Then immediately we go back to the shifts, back to the mechanization, industrialization. They have practiced motion, absolute conservation of movement. Oops, all right, let me clear my ink so I can circle some more in a chorus line. Oops, where all the women are trying to look just like the other women. Let's see, they line up on the express strip. So we had the Mondrian arrangement beginning the description of the very precise mechanistic society contrasted with the Harlequin. Back to the mechanization. Here we are back to the Harlequin with his elfin grin. A tooth missing, oops, on the left side, and he's using homemade pouring troughs. So he's our epitome of an individual. Okay, this last paragraph, I love the whole thing. This paragraph is bookended by two tiny sentences, jelly beans. And this whole part in the middle is one big, complex, chaotic sentence about chaos. I love it. I'm not going to read it to you because I'm really hoping that everybody taking an online course is really literate, perhaps way more so than me. But I love this paragraph. It's perfect for this study. Now, let's go to the top of page 218. And here we have another big paragraph, really similar. This one, another big complex sentence describing the reaction to the Harlequin's dumping of jelly beans. The shift workers are not individuals, but they're having a great time. They're not serious. They're not scientific, rational data. They're having fun. This is contrasted here with these short staccato sentences. 7 minutes, 7 minutes, 7 minutes. Each sentence is getting a little bit longer. The machine is winding down, grinding to a halt, and then we have chick, 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 the ticking of time away. And we find that this tiny matter, hardly worth note, has caused a disaster of major importance. So we have the contrast and the result and the understanding that this is a system sensitive to initial conditions. The tiny change, hardly worth note, of the jelly beans and the 7 minutes causes a disaster of major importance. So what do you do if you are a society that thrives on having things work right and properly? You find your situation analysts and you analyze the data. You get all the data you can, you find all the answers you can. So the situation analysts try to come up with answers, but they don't get all the answers. And how many questions ever are? So here's another little nudge towards chaos. It's so complex, you can't ever answer all the questions. So let me go to the next page again. Actually, let's skip a couple pages here. Page 220. So let me go down another page. Oops. So I've kind of skipped the explanation of how they've come to this point in their society. You may decide not to skip that, but we're kind of going a little quickly. But we find out that they sort of came to this place because there was a war on. But wasn't there always? Here we are in the Cold War. We're realizing that the wars didn't end. The wars that we thought would end all wars didn't. We haven't solved all of our problems. So let's move down to the next section where Pretty Alice notes that the Harlequin speaks with a great deal of inflection. This implies that other people do not speak with a great deal of inflection. They don't express their emotions. They are in a rational society where they don't really do that, and it's not encouraged. And we will find that it's not encouraged in a moment. Here we go. Because the Harlequin tries to stalk out. He tries to stalk out, slamming the door. But the door won't let him express his emotion that way. It sighs shut softly. So society is frustrating the Harlequin. All right. Then we're going to go skip a few, partly because I don't want to take up all the time reading this story to you bit by bit. But I'm going to stop here. It's the second to last page, which I'll tell you what page number that was. It is 223. And I stopped here because here's a big clue. I found the title of the story repeated. If you see that in the story, you might be about to learn something important, something the author feels is really important. So here is the confrontation between the TikTok man and the Harlequin. And this is the conflict right here, where the Harlequin explains he'd rather be dead in this dumb society, and the TikTok man tries to get him to conform. All right, let's go to the last page. And we find that Everett Seymour, who was the Harlequin, was destroyed. He's just a regular person, and he's destroyed. But in every revolution, a few die who shouldn't, but they have to. That sounds kind of deterministic to me. If you're going to make a change, which things change through time, it's very hard to keep a static anything, much less a complex society. If you're going to have a revolution, some people have to die. And the Harlequin wanted a revolution, and he had to die. All right. But a change was definitely made because the TikTok man was late. And he says, that's ridiculous. But as he goes into his office, he says, "Mermy, mermy, mermy, mermy." So a change definitely has been made. All right, so let's go back a little. This story was nonlinear in the structure of the story because it didn't go from beginning, middle to end. It was sensitive to initial conditions. Rather, the society was sensitive. The system was, because the jelly beans that should have made a tiny problem caused a major disaster. Let's see. It's definitely deterministic. The Harlequin died. Some people have to die in a revolution. And let me make sure I didn't leave anything. Well, it's dynamical. It is changing through time, and especially at this last where we see that the TikTok man is changing. So we went from a society that was relatively simple and running smoothly, rational, industrial, mechanistic. They had ended all wars, and they thought they had answered all questions with their scientific method. Well, now we find that it's more complex than they thought. They couldn't predict the Harlequin, and they're still in a Cold War, and we're finding still peace is incredibly elusive, world peace. So they couldn't answer all their questions either. There's going to be some things we will never be able to answer, never understand. All right, so this week you guys will analyze Bradbury's classic, A Sound of Thunder. And I really look forward to finding out what you come up with. Thank you.